The stream is live.
Welcome to Generation Dan, everybody. For us, it's the end of the weekend, which sucks. For you, it's almost the end of the week. So fuck you, future. I'm Atlas Novak. I'm your millennial. Who else is here with me?
I'm Dino the Generic Marvel. I am your resident old person who hates you. Just to be clear, I hate you. Just whoever you're listening to. That's fine. That's good.
And I'm Carol Newell, the world's best laugh. That's me. I'm a comedian in Los Angeles, and I bet I'm older than you.
So I've learned this the last little while. I'm like, I am not technically old, but I'm like, I look like I'm 1,000, and I used to be 500 pounds, which technically means I had double the gravity. So I'm like 100 is the way I see it. That's the way I perceive it. And but at the same time, I've had it thrown in my face the last couple days. There's a 66-year-old at work. He's like, "You're not very old," and I'm like, "Okay, you are old as dirt, but that's still."
He's the human equivalent of Jupiter. It's fine.
I mean, I'm okay with that. There you go. Hey, what's up, Serge? There we go. Yeah. So
I
welcome,
am
Carol.
Serge just makes it sound like he's Groot. Like he just has to say that over and over. I am Serge.
I mean, that's fantastic. It's a great way to do things. But how's it going, Carol? How are you?
It's going very well. Thank you very much. And lots of shows and shows.
Is always nice, right? Like the idea that everyone's kind of we're back into like the full swing of activities is nice. At the same time, you're like, do you remember those 2 weeks in the beginning of the pandemic when no one was on the road? It was so nice.
Oh, it was so nice.
So nice.
Early
pandemic. Anywhere in LA in 20 minutes. That was
right.
Yeah. There was no expectation to do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. True. Well, I was still working. I'm an essential worker, so I still had to go to work, but it was nice. No traffic.
Like, at least in like in terms of being a comedian, there was no like weird competitive grind set present because it's like what else are you supposed to do? Just hang out at home.
You had weird people who are like, I've been on 7 Zoom comedy shows, and you're like, that's not a good thing. That's a bad thing because that will make you go crazy because they were horrible. They're still horrible. But whatever.
Agree to disagree.
Listen, I was on a few shows, Carol, where people would pay attention and engage, and you're like, great, wonderful. But then I was on a bunch of shows where people are like, and they're on their phone, and you're like, what are you doing? Why are you being like that? You're like, you're rude. You're a rude person. And you're not
my shows were awesome. I want to tell you, I did the world's best laugh all through the pandy, and it was fantastic. And I had a shit ton of friends that did the shows with me, and we had a great time.
But that's the thing.
They were fun.
As long as everyone's engaged, they're very fun. But as soon as somebody starts picking their nose, you're like, oh no, that's a problem.
Wait, what are you talking about? That's the best time. You turn the camera off, then you pick your nose.
You know what
people stand up with no pants?
Was watching some Zoom meeting, and this lady, I guess, forgot what was happening, and she got up with her phone and walked down the hall and went to the bathroom while she was on the Zoom meeting. And all the Zoom panel was like, oh my God, what's happening?
Yeah, like I feel like there was a new level of etiquette where you're like, you would private message, be like, hey man, everyone can see you right now, and then other people are like, I just don't care. I'm not wearing pants, and I want everyone to know it. And you're like, well,
and then there's I applaud you. The one guy who's like, that's my fetish. Everyone shut the fuck up.
Yeah, that was the best.
Yeah. Good times. It was an enjoyable, the idea, especially like when they were like I remember the first like flatten the curve, and I'm like, science doesn't work that way. Let's start there. But also, and I'm like, all right, sure, 2 weeks. Okay, let's see what happens. And everyone kind of lost their mind a little bit. And I'm like, I'm definitely here for this. This is an enjoyable experience. Because I'm like, look, you were all crazy. All you people thought you were normal. Nope, you're crazy like me. It's great.
Yeah. And then 2 months later, we were doing outside shows. And we did that for the rest of the pandemic, and it was fantastic because I could drive all over the place because I'm an essential worker, and I had no problem getting anywhere.
Nice.
So yeah, and doing park shows and parking lot shows and fountains, and wherever we could find a space that looked like it was suitable, that had seating.
Yeah. Which is like, realistically, you have to pivot in those kind of situations, right? Like, it's just because you're like, I have to be funny or else I will explode. That's just,
I was like, I'm not staying home and not doing comedy. That's not happening.
No. My cat learned to laugh through the pandemic, and that's fine. It was a lot of work, but he's got it.
Laugh.
And he's I'm like, that was a laugh. It was definitely a laugh. You got to hear the tone. It's fair.
Mm-hmm.
So Atlas, you wanted to talk about Scary Sundays.
So last time Carol was here, we did the kid culture chart, if people remember, where it was like a big chart of what kids grew up with and then all that stuff. This time, after having a week off for Thanksgiving because I'm a teacher, that's like a one upside about it. I don't want to go to work tomorrow. I'm going to. No one does, but the Sunday Scaries, apparently they're called, where you just dread having the Sunday.
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely ruins your Sunday. I try and equate it to the whole idea of that, listening to the news. You're like, if you don't listen to the news, you're uninformed. If you believe the news, you're misinformed, right? That's a fair, because there's a lot of garbage out there. But at the same time now, it's like news, you're hearing about crazy stories from the you're like, bro, I'm just gonna relax. I don't care. I just don't care, and I'm just removing myself. And it's like getting stressed out about tomorrow, you're like, makes me lose today actively, which is truth. That's the reality of it, but it's a hard thing to kind of grasp, where you're like, hey, if you fear tomorrow, you lose the present existence, where you're like, oh, I just act without I just assume every day I'm gonna die. That's basically how I live at this point, right?
That kind of just sounds like a Hallmark card. If you fear tomorrow, you lose today.
It does sound like a Hallmark card.
Sunset,
I'm not just a pretty face. I know fancy. It's fancy. Yeah, it's definitely a meme. No, but that's I hate Mondays like everyone else. Let's be fair. But I also hate Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays. Any day that somebody's like, hey, you have to wake up at this specific time, I'm like, absolutely not. That's a horrible existence for me, right? I like to be early to things, but at the same time, I really hate the idea of people going, you have to be here by this time. And I'm like, do I? I don't think so. There's some wiggle room.
It's so funny. I'm late to work every damn day, but I am early to every comedy show.
Nice.
Well, that's the other thing, right? You guys have heard the whole thing. If you can't change the people around you, change the people around you, right? And it's like when you're doing a job that, well, there are a lot of jobs that are easy to hate, right? If you work anywhere in retail or customer service, 100% you hate your job, and that's not on you. That's just a horrible job, right? It's just factual. So it's like at the same time, you're kind of going, I just need to do something, right? Right now. So Carol, the last month, I was working, last month, I guess now we're almost in December. So in October, I was working a Halloween village. So I actively was able to tell people that I was going to murder them and eat their children. And
nice.
I felt so seen. I was just like, this is my real calling. I feel like it's just, yeah. I definitely made a few people pee. I made 2 guys poop, but they were a little older, but I'm still going to take credit for it. They had a poop primed, but I'm like, I definitely made that thing come out. So, I felt so enjoyable. And now I'm doing a Christmas event, and I'm like, it's outside, it's cold. And there were a couple times where it started raining, and I'm like, hey, I'm gonna leave. And they're like, that's reasonable. I'm like, yeah, I'm paid hourly. I don't care. I'm like, I'm just gonna go home, because I'm two exits down the highway. So I'm like, yeah, I'm not gonna.
I'm not standing out here in the rain. Fuck that.
Well, this is the first year or first winter where I'm not over 300 pounds, Carol. So I'm like, it's cold. It's cold. I like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had lost 80 pounds one time, and whoo, it was cold. I had to layer up.
Yeah, right. Like
In
my
the
my
summer. In
my
the summer.
wife. Yeah, well, in the summer. Oh, for sure. It's my wife got me like thermal layers, and I'm just like, okay. I'm like, apparently I have to layer everything now because I'm like, I learned early on, like, hey, if you want to be tough, you have to have thick skin. So I grew 16 layers of skin, and now I only have like 4, and I'm like, man, it's cold. It's Canada, and it is cold. So
Oh, that would be the worst. Yeah.
He was telling me that apparently when he was at his fattest, he would go to work and sit down and like his belly will have had frozen
yeah,
outside and was just like tap 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 solid.
yeah.
Which
Wow.
I would walk around with my jacket open because like I was fat. My jacket didn't close. I was just like, I'm like, doot, 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 doot. I get back to work and I'm just like, why is my desk cold? I'm like, that's weird. And then I grab my belly and I'm like, oh, that's frozen solid. Jesus. Probably not helping.
Wow.
You know?
you get into some
crazy.
kind of like office street fighter, and that's like your big Hadouken is like the frozen belly.
Yeah. Iron ice belly, bam, and just like people will break their hand, like, oh no, like I feel like that's reasonable. That's why, like, even now, like I'll grab stuff and just move, like, because we were like moving trees and stuff like that. So I'm like, I grab a Christmas tree and lift it over my head and walk away, and people are like, what the hell? And I'm like, I'm still a giant, like I'm just not, you know.
I get to do that in a couple weeks. There's a Christmas tree lot across the street from our apartment, so I can just walking across the street.
Nice.
The stairs.
That is useful. It makes you feel very like, I took this tree and now I'm walking around with it. It makes you feel kind of very manly. You're like,
until the first time where you hear the crack and then you're like, oh shit, I'm getting too old for this.
And that's actually your bones. It's not the tree, it's your bones. You're just like, oh no, I'm falling apart. Yeah. I don't know. It's one of those things. That's why I'm like, even now, like today when we're doing this, it's Sunday, and I have to work tomorrow, and I'm just checking the forecast religiously, and I'm like, please don't be too cold. Please don't be too cold. But also, you know, it's winter. It's gonna be cold. It's just, you know.
Yep.
Here's the thing, though. I like the Sunday are full of dread, and then the Monday isn't that bad because you can commiserate with everyone around you that it's Monday.
True.
By Tuesday, you better have gotten your shit together, and then if you're in a bad mood, people are like giving you the business, and it's like that's what makes Tuesdays worse to me.
See, but is that reasonable? Like, hey, I'm paid to do a job. Why do I have to be happy doing it? I feel like that's asking too much, right? Like, I'm here, I'm doing the job. I don't have to be polite. I don't have to be like, hey, what's up? Like, I will actively lie. People are like, good morning. I'm like, good morning to you. How are you? And they're like, I'm good. How are you? I'm like, super duper. And they're like, that guy's on cocaine. There's like a lot of cocaine. And I'm like, nah, you got to do something, you know? But Breakfast of Champions, it's fine.
I work with people that are happy, sunshiny people all the dang time. And yeah, so, you know, I don't have any choice but to be at least sociable.
Carol, you're a hero that you haven't murdered them all. I feel like that you're a hero. That's fair. That's you know.
And then I have Tuesday and Wednesday when I see my boyfriend because he works nights. So I have Tuesday and Wednesday to look forward to. And then by the next day, it's already Thursday, which is Friday Eve. So my week goes pretty swell, actually.
That's a good setup. That's a good setup.
I mean, like, here's the thing with Tuesdays for me is that aside from what I just mentioned, that my school they have block scheduling. So Monday and Thursday you have
that's racist. Okay.
Like instead of 6 like 50-minute periods, they're 3 an hour and a half or hour and 40 minutes, whatever it is, periods.
All right.
So there's 3 of those, and you have one set for Monday and Thursday, the other set for Wednesday and Friday. Tuesday is all 8 classes together, and they're half an hour long, and it's terrible because somehow, even though the periods are shorter,
done.
Well, and the reason for that is it's like professional development day, so like that ends, and then we the teachers have to go to like a staff meeting after work.
Yeah, you mentioned that on a Tuesday for a staff meeting.
Yeah.
Like, granted, Tuesday is better than Friday, but also, what are you talking about? Like, absolutely not.
And it ends the day off on such a note. Like, I would rather have that be Monday, pack all the misery in on one day, and get it over with, instead of Monday, which is whatever, then you got to like go through this other stumbling block, and then the rest of your week happens.
That sounds like some complete bullshit.
Yeah. I find that meetings in general are bullshit. Like
totally,
that's an email, and if you don't get the email, fire that person. They can't read. That's fine. It's too good. It's just simple.
Yeah, I had somebody make a mistake last week, and they were like, "Well, I didn't see the email. I work in the warehouse, so I don't really check my emails." Well, that's convenient. Thank you.
No, that's your job. You failed at your job.
Yeah.
Get fucked. Like,
and then on top of that, they're also sending like 80 emails a second, so it's hard to keep up with everything.
Like I worked with a guy where I was the associate for two financial advisors, and one guy, everything was like urgent. I'm like, hey man, if everything's urgent, nothing is urgent. And he just kind of stopped it, and he's just looking at me. He's like, if everything's urgent, nothing is urgent. I go, yeah. And then I started haggling with him. I'm like, listen, I go, if you need something urgently, I can do it, but like
not everything.
That will be probably tomorrow, because I already have my work for today. I go, if it's urgent, it has to happen today. You owe me lunch, which is just Subway. Not a big deal. Well, back when Subway was reasonably bright.
Back when $5 foot long meant $5 foot.
Exactly. And then I'm like, he's like, if this is like a big problem and it's urgent, and I'm like, you have to take me for a steak lunch. I'm like, and he would be like, well, it was financial. It was in a bank. We had money. Yeah. So I'm like, I used to be a real person, Carol. I was like a real actual person. Now I'm not. So he would be like, hey, this is urgent. And I would lean over. I'm like, how urgent? He's like,
is it though? Is it really?
It can be done tomorrow. I'm like, okay, that's no problem. That's fine. Yeah. And then a couple times he's like, this is really urgent. And I'm like, I'm looking at it, and you should have given to me this last weekend. And he's like, where are we going for steak? And I'm like, there you go. Now you know you've been punished. No, I'm like, there has to be some sort of exchange, right? Like if someone doesn't suffer for their failing, then they're just going to keep on failing. You have to make it otherwise. Well, it's not really an incentive. It's more of a punishment. So I'm like, it's my incentive, really. I'm like, I'm a wizard. So I'm like, if you need my magic, it's going to cost you a steak. I need to feel the animal suffer.
I would love for you to, like, at some point during your time working with him, you're like, okay, buddy, this is a movie called The Incredibles. Now I want you to absorb what the message of the movie is and get back to me.
It's one of those things, right? That's the thing, is like people live in their own little universe, right? And you don't want to, like, I am a notoriously bubble popper to people, and like my wife hates me because like she's like, well, that's how that is, and I'm like, no, it's not. That is not the real world. You live in a dream world. And she's like, why do you do these things to me? And I'm like, because we're married. We're contractually obliged to stay together. That's it. That's the law. We brought the government into this. Now we can't get out. So it's one of those things where I'm like, when people get weird, and I'm just like, like I've been doing this at work where there's certain areas. So it's called the Night of Lights. If everyone wants to go, in Toronto. It's by Scarborough Town Center. So, but they have like these big archways with like light decorations and like giant candy canes and all sorts of cool stuff, right? Because it's Christmas. And one of the areas has like, they've secured rebar to the ground and they're running lights along the ground, which I'm like, you're on your knees running Christmas lights. And somebody's like, hey, can you help with ground lights? And I'm like, no. And they're like, what? And I'm like, I'm not going to do that. And I'm like, I'm too old and my knees are too brittle. I'm not going to do that. And they're like, oh, okay, we'll find something else. I'm like, great. And I'm like, yeah, those young people, they can do ground lights.
That's a can I or will I?
Oh, no, it's absolutely not, because we had these bunch of Christmas trees and we had to move them. And I'm like, okay, let's make sure we move them once. Is this area okay for us to store them? Because there's 120 trees. And they're like, yes, this area is totally fine. And then the next day they're like, you got to move the trees. And I'm like, you sons of bitches, right? And so now they're like, hey, do you want to do this? I'm like, I'd rather move trees again. That's my answer. I'm like, I'll go move trees. This
is why people dread on Sunday and why we should have a 3-day weekend all the time.
They've done studies that said 4-day weeks are actually just as or more productive than the 5-day week, and that we should have 4-day weeks.
Good.
So I was talking about this with somebody else, was a 6-hour day versus an 8-hour day. It's like, I do a lot more in a 6-hour day than I do 8 hours worth of work in 6 hours, but I'll do 6 hours of work in an 8-hour day. And I'm like, that actually makes sense. Cause like, if you like, especially when you have to commute to work, which let's say is an hour each way ish, right? Then you have 8 hours worth of work. So now you're at 10 hours. Then you have to prepare a lunch possibly, or plan other stuff out. So that's going to take extra time. So you're like half of your entire day, your entire waking life is that. And then you have a couple of hours to like, touch yourself and go to sleep. That's it. Maybe watch a movie. You're like, that's not reasonable. That is a ridiculous requirement, right? So, but I'm talking to Atlas. Atlas, you're a teacher. You don't have normal hours. You're like, I work 3 hours a day, maybe it stops, and then I'm off for the summer.
Okay, the off for the summer thing, I'll give you along with everything else. But the other thing with like being a teacher, there's all the like lesson planning and.
Hey man, we've all watched The Simpsons. We know you get a big book of teachers' answers. You don't have to plan anything. We all know, okay? The secret is out.
Look, I'm trying my best not to end up like Mr. Frond from Bob's Burgers. That's all I want to not be as a teacher. He's like the guidance counselor who's like a big dork.
Oh yes, he kind of looks like a Wish.com version of Krusty the Clown. You got the like triangle head.
Yeah, kind of. Oh God, you're right.
Yeah, I know.
By the way, in 2023, it's Temu now. It's not Wish.
Oh God,
that's a good point.
So many goddamn commercials for Temu.
Oh, it's the worst.
Yeah,
and they're just after your info.
Okay, here's the thing. Okay, have you guys ever seen an advertisement for like a drug dealer or like somewhere that's really worth going to? No, they don't have to advertise. You will search them out. So I'm like, I'm kind of at a point where I'm like, if you have to advertise, don't touch it. Just it's a scam. It's immediately a scam. Because like somebody was like, I saw a commercial for like Robin Hood flour, and I'm like, you're advertising flour? Like the basis for bread? Are you joking? Like that's insane.
Oh, I thought you meant flowers like petals and shit.
No, like baking flour.
Oh, you are. That's. It's always funny seeing like a Starbucks commercial too. Like, who? Everyone knows who Starbucks is. Like, you don't need to like get the name out there. You know,
if you don't, you have a better life than I do. That's fine. Realistically, it's not. It's one of those things where like if it's actually good, everyone will know about it. Like,
I think the idea is that like when you tell people to tell this to, okay, so my sister does market research, so I've had this argument with her before.
Yeah,
and she's like, it's not to get the name out there, it's to get you thinking about that thing, so the next time you need or want it, that's what pops into your head. That's called witchcraft. I don't.
Yes,
it is.
It's not like in actuality, marketing is all just like charlatans and snake oil. Like it's not. Because how many times have you been like, oh, you know what? I could probably use that, and now it just sits in a corner and does nothing all day. You're like, you don't need that. You're like, it's not. It's.
I have a whole shelf full of that.
Listen, I bought a ridiculous amount of Lego during the pandemic. I still have it, and I'm like, yeah, I love it. But at the same time, you're like, I don't need Lego. It doesn't, it just makes me feel cool. That's all.
You know what's something I realized? Whenever I'm like researching something, most of the time, the best way to like go like get your best whatever it is, best laugh, best whatever object or service that you need, I will go to the subreddit for that thing and ask, and then all the nerds from that community will be like, you should do X, Y, and Z thing.
Well, like I especially too, like I don't know, maybe it's just me and like the my generation, but like for me, I'd rather talk to somebody to get their feedback about why is this good for me? Do I need this in my life? Right? Like, and even like, hey, how does this work? Okay, can we just have a conversation? Like, I'll send you instructions. I'm like, that's fine. Can you just walk me through this like face to face, and then I'll figure it out, because I do know how to read like a little. So I'm like, I can read stuff, but I can't like if I don't know you're a real person, because I think it's more so too, like I want to judge how dumb that person is that's giving me instructions.
Yeah.
Because if they're dumb and they're like, well, I'm smarter than that guy, so I'll figure it out. versus like someone I'm like, hey, this guy actually knows what he's doing. I don't know. I should really listen. Let me write down some notes and kind of like piece together how smart you have to be to do said task. Right.
Right.
I don't know.
That part.
Yeah, it's like the idea that I remember when I asked a bunch of when I first did comedy, like in 2017, I was already an old person in my mind. So I was also 500 pounds. So I'm like, I'm aging like milk. It was horrible. But it's like I asked young guys and I'm like, hey, like, do you have any pointers? And they're like, oh, public speaking is hard. And I'm like, public speaking is not hard. Being funny is hard. And they're like, no. And I'm like, I have no problem. Like I was 12 years old. I spoke in front of 1,000 people. I'm like, I don't have a problem talking in front of people. Cause if anything, I don't shut up is my issue. Right now, I just need to be funny, which I'm like, sometimes. Mostly, I just talk about poop and being bigger than people, which I'm like, just my life. Everybody poops, and I'm bigger than most people, so hey, it works. So I don't know. It's one of those kind of things that I'm like, no, that's not the advice I need. I don't need that. No, I need more detail, right?
I always tell new comics the best advice that I can give them is it's all about the reps. Get up as much as you can, as many times as you can, and the more you do it, the funnier you will be.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely true. But that's the weird thing is that you have to be alive. Like you have to go do stuff. And that's like, and then you just try and think of it as a funny experience and then relay that information. Mm-hmm. That's the easiest way of looking at things, right? Like that's if you don't, that's why it's like when you don't go out, I'll watch this stuff on TV. That's not funny stuff. It's not funny stuff. Have you watched TV? It's horrible. It's people are crying. They're like, oh, I'm an actor. You're like, you're barely a person. Let's just calm down. So.
Yeah, all my comedy is just stories about my life, things that have happened to me or my family, and things like that. So, I mean, if nothing ever happened, then there would be no new material.
Exactly.
It's also why I don't like the adage insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. That's practice.
I mean, yes.
I get the nuance in it where it's like where you're doing literally the same thing every time. Like in the context of comedy, insanity would be doing the same bit with the same cadence, with the same wording every single time.
Sure.
And not like tweaking it or adding new things
or
that kind of thing. But like also it sort of discouraged practice from me, like as a person for a long time. Because like I remember hearing that as a kid, and then I also remember like if I'm not good at this thing, why should I like keep doing it?
Yeah, well, like that's the weird thing is people are like you have to suck at something before you become good at it, right? Like that's just how things work. Like the idea that you can start something and be magnificent at it, you're like that is a horrible thing because that dissuades you from trying stuff and failing. So you learn, right? And then you're just like, well, if I'm not good at it instantly, I'm not going to do this. You're like that.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
That's not a real thing.
Yeah, like I'm just saying that adage is not good in terms of like encouraging growth.
Yeah, but at the same time, like the worst thing is like guys who will do like, oh, I did like 3 shows in a night, and you're like, okay, but all 3 shows you did the exact same set in the exact same order and bombed 3 times. That is insanity, right? Like I would go out to 3 open mics, and I'm like, okay, each time I had a different order or a different closer or a different intro. Like each time I would switch things up. Mm-hmm. So even if it was the same material, I was trying it a different way just to really make it as good as I possibly could. Right.
Yeah. In like a macro sense, it's doing comedy over and over. That would seem like insanity. In a micro sense, you're doing things like changing things around, but that's still doing comedy.
Well, the other thing about comedy is if you do the reps and you practice, say a certain specific set, that it gets better over time because you find the funny places and you embellish those. Yeah. And when you get a real opportunity to get on a bigger stage, you know it like the back of your hand. That's
also true.
That's the thing about doing the reps.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely. I do have a few bits like that, but at the same, like I have a few sets where it's like, okay, these 6 jokes are good as an intro, and I know they work together because they feed off each other, but also I have a good callback for them later on. So I'm like, okay, so now I have another 3 minutes to fill with a story or a weird experience, and that's okay too. So it's like I can mix and match that stuff because I'm like, I try never to do the same set ever, right? Because I'll even just walk up to people and be like, "Oh, you guys look like assholes up here," and be like, "What the hell?" And I'm like, "Yeah, fight me. I'll kick your ass. That's fine." I'm like, "I'm old and now I'm fast." I'm like, "It's great." So it's.
I've told this story on the show before, but there was this guy who used to go up to West Side Comedy Theater's open mic every week and do literally the exact same set in the same order with the same cadence every single time. And I don't know where he is today, but I haven't seen him around LA. So
did people laugh? People who saw it for the first time, would they?
The first time, yes. The 86th time, not so much.
Yeah, like that's one of those things where, like, my thing. I remember the first 6 months that I was doing comedy, I kept on. It was the same set and just refined more, but it was basically the same set. And then a couple of people were like, I finally got to a bigger stage where I actually got paid for the set. And a few friends were like, bro, you got paid. You're a comedian. That's it. Like, that's the official. You did comedy on a stage, but also made money out of it. Ta-da! You're a comedian, right?
You're professional now.
Yeah, exactly. And that was like one of those things where I was like, okay. And they were like, so are you going to do the same stuff? I'm like, no, I'm never doing any of those jokes again. Like, and they're like, oh, good. Okay. Because I'm like, now I know I can do it. Now I have to work my magic and just be funny as a person, which I'm like, it's kind of easy when you're 500 pounds, but at the same time, it's exhausting. So as is like just waking up in the morning, you're like, oh God, I'm still alive. Jesus, it's one of those things. So,
oh God, I'm still alive.
I've woken up a lot of mornings like that. Even now, I'm just like, oh, life's still happening. Okay.
Still? Okay, fine.
Yeah. Like, I was promised the nuclear apocalypse. I was waiting for that.
When is that happening? Come on, now let's get to it.
Like, I made the joke middle of the pandemic where I was like, this is bullshit. I was promised bodies in the street. I was planning on becoming a warlord. You guys have all ruined this for me. Why couldn't you guys take this seriously and start spitting in each other's mouths earlier? And
I heard there were some bodies in the street in New York. They were piling them up in the park or something like that.
There are always bodies in New York, though. New York is a fucking black pit of evil, yeah.
I've seen The Warriors. I know how it gets.
Yeah, well, listen, that's a accurate depiction of how New York is. I don't know, like it's one of those things where I'm like I wanted more, and then people are like, at the same time, we were so terrified we didn't leave the house for months, which I'm like, I'm okay with, because I'm like, I hate people in general, so it's much easier.
Yeah, I never stayed home. I never quarantined at all whatsoever. I was out the whole time.
Lucky bastard. The rest of us are trying to figure out how to wear jeans again. Carol's like, I never stopped. Yeah.
I didn't. Yeah. I ran into so many comics after the pandemic, after people started going back out, and they're like, I haven't done comedy in 2 years. I don't know what I'm doing. I did it the whole time.
Joke's on you. This was my plan from the beginning. Carol was the mastermind. I like it. It's good.
It's like how I imagine it was like the Thanos snap of comedy, right? You had all these people who
just dropped off, moved away, moved back home. Yeah, totally, 100%.
And then the ones that came back, it was like when they undid the snap, and now there's a big disparity between people who are still around and people who didn't.
It was fun trying to watch people get back into comedy.
Oh yeah. The funny part was, like, I really enjoyed seeing how weird some people got, which I'm like, oh, you fully lost your mind during the pandemic. And I'm like, nice. All right, let's see how this goes. And then they try to be funny, and I'm like, oh, that didn't work out at all.
Yeah, hilarious.
It's one of those things where you're just kind of going, it happens. What are you gonna do? You should pick up a different hobby. Maybe try painting. I don't know.
Yep.
That's the amount of people that abandoned everything is very perplexing. You're like, it was 2 weeks. Just calm yourself. Just relax. It wasn't that big of a deal.
I saw a lady who is a comedian and she was only doing Zoom shows and she would not leave her house. Like she ordered everything to the front door and sprayed it down with Lysol. And she barely did a show like 2 months ago, her first show back.
Yeah.
From since the pandemic. I was like, God dang. That's
Yeah. That's a lot. Like even we got to a point because I live with my in-laws and they're infirm. So I'm like, the whole thing is I'm like, if I brought home COVID, I'm like, my wife would kill me because
you would kill them.
Exactly, 100%. Which I'm like, I don't want to be responsible for that, right?
Right.
So like we were very careful, but I'm like, I still went out. Like I still did some shows. Like I did a lot of Zoom stuff, but I'm like, I was so eager to be in front of people, and then like people got close. I'm like, hey, not too close. Just calm down. Just relax. Like, give it a couple of months before you start spitting each other's mouths. Just that's a reasonable person.
That's disgusting.
The mental image alone.
I don't get that. Like, there's a whole thing in the younger men thing where they like to spit on you, and I'm like, or spit in your mouth or spit in your face. I just don't understand how that's disgusting.
To be very clear, Carol, I am just doing it to be funny. I think it's disgusting too. So let's just make sure everyone knows that I'm not out here spitting on people and be like, hey, open your mouth, let me spit in there. That's not my thing.
I would love to see okay, so you know how every Hallmark movie is the same. You have the equivalent of, it's like a Hallmark movie of a comedian moving back to their hometown because of the pandemic.
Sure.
And then just shacking up with whatever flannel wearing girl with a small town business, and then that's it. That's all I want to see. Hallmark, get going. I know it's Christmas movie season coming up here.
I mean, it'll work, right?
Yeah.
Big time comedian goes back to the small town and shenanigans.
Shenanigans
ensue. They fall in love. Was it? I saw like a tweet that cracked me up. That was where did I put it? It was.
And she's an open micer. That thing.
Yeah, that's even better. Ladies, before you quit your high-paying ad exec job in the city and move in with a handsome, charming, flannel-wearing, Christmas-loving man who runs an adorable small business in your hometown, remember to ask where he was on January 6th.
Which is hilarious. That is hilarious.
That's from the Russell Shaw on Twitter.
Nice.
Listen, that's the kind of stuff, though, that where there are some things that have been happening where you're just like, man, the amount of crazy people have embraced through this whole shift, you're just kind of going, oh, that's a lot crazier than I thought you would be, but do you? And then, people at the same time, people who have been like, oh man, let's hang out. And you're like, no, I never liked you. I'm good. Thanks. No problem. You're like, hey, come on my show. I'm like, oh no, I hate you. I don't want to be around you at all.
How do you answer the let's hang out sometime thing where you kind of don't want to, but you still want to fulfill the social moment, like get your points for the moment or whatever?
You just bullshit and say, yeah, totally, 100%, and then just
never
follow through.
Like, absolutely, hit me up on
IG.
Not even be like, yeah, hit me up on Viber. That's where I do my stuff. And they'll be like, what's Viber? You're like, yeah, see you later. And then just walk away.
Or even worse, just start saying the names of chat things that aren't really a thing anymore or don't exist anymore. Yeah, hit me up on AIM. We'll
contact me on Vimeo.
100%. Yeah. Message me on my Cash App. We're good. Yeah.
The
check me out on Vine.
Yeah. Yik Yak. Hit me up on Yik Yak.
Yeah. That's one of those things where I'm at a point.
You can always find me on AOL chat.
Oh yes. Just check out my MySpace. I have you in my top 12. We're good. like
Hilarious.
the
Carrier
idea.
pigeon. I'll send you a carrier pigeon.
100% smoke signal always works. I'm always on the lookout.
Telegram.
I got my binoculars out and everything.
Not like the app, an actual telegram.
It's one of the things that I've been banking as of late is whenever people will ask me questions that I don't want to answer. So like someone's like, "Oh, how do you guys know each other?" I'm like, "Oh, French Foreign Legion," and I just walk away. And the other person's like, "What the fuck did you just say?" And I'm like, "I did it." So a friend of ours, who we've known for years, she was like, "Hey, the company's lawyer has a box for a Blue Jays game. I'm allowed to invite people. Do you guys want to come? There's gonna be food included and booze included." And I'm like, all you had to say was food included, because they had like a bucket of chicken tenders. And I'm like, I ate like 3 buckets of chicken tenders. They were delicious.
Wow.
And yeah, no, it was great. And we went, and ultimately the question arose, and they're like, "Oh, so how do you guys know each other?" I'm like, "Oh, we both served in the French Foreign Legion." And then I turned around and went to the bar. And the lawyer's like, "Oh, I never know you served." And she's like, "Gotta go," and just walked away. And I'm like, "No, just leave them confused." And then they're just like, "Hey, did you know that they served?" And I'm like,
I
they
just
don't
love the
know
idea
anything.
of them, because you're in Canada, the idea of them being like, they have one of those in Quebec. Is that like,
Yeah, right.
Who knows? I don't even know if they have it or go back. It doesn't even matter. I'm like, "Oh no, I was in Algeria. Who's gonna check up on it?" Like I'm at a point where I'm like, if I'm gonna not tell you the truth, I'm gonna make sure it's insane.
yeah.
You know?
And then just start dropping countries that don't even exist anymore. Yeah, we served in Yugoslavia.
Sure, yeah, under Tito. Well, whatever, that's fine. Like, and I had one person was like, somebody was talking about fighting, and I'm like, I could beat up a dragon. And they're like, "What did you just say?" I'm like, "Yeah, no problem. I can take it easily, happily." And they're just like, "No, you can't." I'm like, "Yes, I can."
And then my dumb ass would be in there like, okay, now what kind of dragon are we talking? Are we talking like Western European, like fire breathing, sitting on the pile of gold dragon? Or are we doing like East Asia, like they're more serpent-like?
That's the kind of questions I want. Those are the kind of questions I want. I'd be like, "Listen, as long as he's not fire breathing," and
questions.
Yeah, science is not about what we want to know. It's about what we don't care about. That's what we need to answer.
Meg, these are the questions. Gotta make sure you ask them.
Yeah, it's no, because listen, it's number one, none of your business. How do we met? Go to hell. None of your business.
I don't know. There's like the towing the line of just trying to be friendly and not wanting to
bullshit
or just get into a longer conversation.
Being friendly is, the huckster's crutch. Just absolutely no. I don't have to be friendly. I don't have to be friendly to anyone. So it's like, "Hey, we should hang out sometime." You're like, "No, absolutely not." And just walk away. Just make them think about their own shit. You're like, "No, I don't want to hang out with you." Like, just so you know, Atlas, when people ask, when I'm at your wedding and people are like, "Oh, how do you know Atlas?" I'm like, "Oh, we served in the French Foreign Legion," and I'm going to walk away.
The funniest part is on the cards, like on the back, it's like, who traveled the longest to be here? It's you and Victoria. So you're like on the program.
Perfect.
Somehow.
I'd be like, "I came from Mount Doom." This is Sauron's face without the mask. It's fine. Yeah, whatever. That works. It's like, there's no point. Okay. Number one, the truth is boring. Let's just start there. Okay. Traditionally, the truth is boring. And realistically, let's put on a show. Why not? Be like, "I rode here in a dragon." Be like, "What?" Yeah. Prove me wrong. Have you ever looked up? It's scary up there. Whatever.
There are some truthful things that are pretty awesome. Like one of the earliest recorded cases of a prosthetic limb was a guy named Guts of the Iron Hand, who was in the Holy Roman Empire in the 500s. And he was frequently quoted as saying, "That person, whoever, like, can lick my ass." This was a real guy.
Hey, that guy was ahead of his times. He knew what was coming. And now people were like, all about that ass licking. I'm like, listen, you guys are all perfect. Okay, that guy knew the future. He may have been a wizard. I'm just gonna say, he sacrificed his hand.
Or a time traveler.
You're absolutely right, Carol. He sacrificed a hand to journey the stream of time. And he was like, everyone is going to be eating ass at some point. I'm getting ahead of the curve. I'm going to tell you guys do it from now. That's reasonable.
Oh my God. What do you guys do on like the Sunday to try and make that less sucky for yourself?
As little as possible.
you know what? I try and get ahead of things that have been aching my brain. So like stuff that I like has been in the way and I got to set it up and stuff like that. I'll try and schedule that for Sunday specifically. That way I have a sense of achievement for the weekend and I don't feel as shitty on Monday. Like I feel shitty every day. My wife is like, do you think you do enough? I'm like, I don't think I do enough of anything, just in general. Like I am a lazy person and let's be very clear. I will find the easiest way to do shit because I'm like, it means I'm doing less and I'm okay with that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
The more I can do just lying down, I'm like, yeah, that's great. Because I do my best work on my back. That is a scientific fact. It's just truthful. So, you know, it's one of those things where I'm just like, yeah, no, I don't. I'll try and do at least one thing where I'm like today, I cleaned the toilet. I'm like, toilet spotless. I'm a good person. That's fine.
Oh, just doing like one little thing. To
I'm a proponent of the 5-minute chores.
Yeah.
Like, if I have to do something for more than 5 minutes, then I don't want to do it. I don't.
That's not unreasonable, Carol. That's not unreasonable. And you know what? It's this weird. People are like, if you can do it in 5 minutes, just do it. If it takes more than 5 minutes, fuck it. Let somebody else do it. I'm like, no, that's fair. That is totally reasonable. I'm with you. Yeah.
100%.
It's okay. So I had this experience. Let me get you guys' feedback on this. Okay. So one of the things that we were doing at this event, which is called Night of Lights, is we were setting up like 5 rows of lights. Okay. So they were kind of like going up and down on a fence. Now, because of the way it's structured, you had to do this black tubing that would be attached to the fence, and then you attach like these light strips to that black tubing. Okay.
Okay.
Now, the black tubing is a little more like, not like PVC, but it's like it's not as bendy, so you kind of have to find its curve and you work off that and it's easy. Whereas the lights are the ones that are covered in plastic, so it's like they have their own kinks, so you have to be a little more careful. You have to secure it more often with zip ties and fine. So I see this guy doing it, who's the nicest guy. He's very friendly, a nice guy and everything, but I see him and he's putting a zip tie every 3 inches.
Oh my God.
And
that's
he's
tedious.
Well, so at the same time, we're getting paid hourly, and he's just plugging away doing this job. So every 3 inches, he's putting on the zip tie. And I'm like, so someone's like, hey, can you take over for him? And I'm like, because they're like, do you want to do ground lights? I'm like, no. They're like, you do that? I'm like, sure. So he got put in the ground lights, and I was like, fuck you. And so I went to his job, and then I was like, So I went over to somebody. I'm like, hey, I noticed that this is done this way, but is there a reason why it's done that way? They're like, oh, well, it kinks. And I'm like, no, I'm clear on what works, but like, does it have to be every 3 inches? Because that is insane. And they're like, no, it just has to be properly in its place. And I'm like, okay. So some areas, yeah, you had to do a few zip ties in a row, very close together. And other areas, like you could go like 10 to 12 inches, like not a big deal. So I plowed through this thing. And I'm kind of like, now, am I the bad person for doing it fast, or is he the bad person for dragging his ass in the first place? And I'm not sure.
I think if it works, that's all that really matters.
Right? But like, he was purposefully not going fast, like, which I kind of am like, I respect his lack of hustle. Like, I'm like,
his lack of hustle.
Yeah. Like, but then also too, like, I definitely made him look bad because he's like, oh, should I do lights? And they're like, no, don't touch the lights, you suck. And I'm like, like, I don't feel bad, but at the same time, I'm like, did I screw this person? And then everyone who's doing them is now in a race against me, and I'm like, don't race me. Number 1, I don't go fast. Number 2, I'm better than you because I'm tall and I have arms like an ape. It's not a good situation, but
you're not gonna win.
Yeah, no. And also too, I'm like, congratulations, you did more. I don't give a shit. Like, it's not great. You achieved something. I'm like, I could eat you like a child. It's just like a. So I don't know. I'm kind of thinking, and I'm like, was I stupid to go faster, or was he ridiculous
for taking his time?
Yeah, like, did he go too far?
Option B.
Yeah. I think so. I think he went too far. Like, you can drag your ass at a reasonable pace, right? Like, as long as you're like, hey, I'm not going to go so fast that I'm going to hurt myself or have to redo stuff. I'm going to take my time and do it, reasonably efficiently. But I'm like, every 3 inches, I'm like, bro, come on. That's too much. It's just too much.
That
It's
is
ridiculous.
that is
It's,
Gotta
ridiculous.
run that zip ties, my friend. Yeah.
well, like that's the like I don't. I'm not against people dragging their ass to doing stuff because, like, realistically, the reward for doing work fast is more work, which it's shit. It's a horrible reward. If anything, it should be candy or pizza. Just
Man, you really came around on that millennial / Gen Z way of looking at work.
no, but this is really physical labor. Like when I was working at a bank, I'm like, bro, like you had to work fast because the more deals you done, the more productive you are, the more productive you are, the more money you made, the more you could be like a dragon and sit on a pile of gold. Which me, I love being a dragon sitting on gold.
Which you can't take in a fight. It's got to be one of the East Asian dragons, probably. Like,
so listen, it's one of those things. I would just stand in his ear and start whispering and make him crazy. That's what I would do. That's the only way to fight a dragon. So he can breathe fire. You can't fight that. So, but yeah. So now I'm just like, listen, we're all being paid hourly. So it's like it's more so like I don't like the idea of not being productive and not contributing. That I'm definitely against. But at the same time, like they're like, hey, move these trees. The first round of moving the trees, I was moving trees by myself, and I'm like, yeah, I'm a powerhouse and I'm super strong, and everyone should be afraid of me. That's fine. By the third time, I was like, hey, grab the other side of the tree. They're like, aren't you gonna do it by yourself? I'm like, no, get fucked. I'm like, I need like a third person. I'll direct you. I'll supervise. Eat shit,
Yeah.
One of those things. I don't know. I have mixed feelings on the whole thing. But yeah. To make a long story short, that's what I do every Sunday, Atlas. I do one thing that makes me seem productive. Ta-da!
I mean, it's a skill that I am trying to teach my students without actually, like, I can't tell them that this is a skill that they need to learn because then they're going to abuse
Reject you.
Yeah,
Also
kinda,
true.
but I still need them to have work done. But
yes.
In school, for the most part, and especially in real life, learning how to look busy and make it look like you've done stuff is an important skill. And it's like one of those things where, if I was their parent, it'd be like, that talk comes from your buddies, not your dad,
I don't know. Some dads are good like that. I don't know, it's like there's a different difference in looking productive and trying to mask the fact that you aren't productive at all.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because listen, you have to do the average amount of work, but look like you're always productive.
Yeah.
And people will be like, hey, that guy's a go-getter, which is bullshit anyway. Right.
There's a famous quote from Otto von Bismarck where he said, I am making rapid progress in the art of using many words to say nothing at all. And I think that's what I think is like what you're getting at, right?
Yeah. So even Victoria said optics are important. But that's the whole idea, right? Like if you walk around with an empty file folder or a clipboard, nobody's gonna bug you. Mm-hmm. You're doing something, right?
Yeah.
Versus if you walk around with where you're just like, I'm just looking around, people are going, that guy's not doing shit, right?
Yeah. No,
even if it's your break.
No, look annoyed and look like you're going somewhere.
Perception is reality.
Yeah.
For sure.
And shout out to my friend Vince, who he works retail, and he took the night shift specifically because there's not really anybody watching.
Yeah.
The only consequence is if day shift shows up and the stuff isn't done.
Yeah.
So as long as he gets it done, no one's really paying attention. Otherwise, there's customers at the beginning and at the end of the shift, and the middle is just do
Wild West.
Yeah, get out.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like you said, Carol. It's perception is reality, right? So if people always think you're lazy, one of the things, if I'm standing around, I'll start stretching, and that way people are like, oh yeah, you got to stretch. We're doing physical labor. You have to stretch, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not taking a break.
Not this kind of stretch.
No. I'll bend over and I'm like, oh, I have a cramp in my quads. I got to do that because I'm moving all this shit. Which you're like, that's a reasonable thing. And I'll do arch my back and be like, got to feel that arch. Which you're like, this is ridiculous. But at the same time, nobody's gonna talk shit because I'm like, yeah, I look at all the trees I've moved. That's just a normal thing.
Do that flamingo stretch where you're like standing on one leg and you're like pulling back on your foot, so you have like.
Bro, I would not
right?
stand on one foot anywhere but my own house, like inside and like where I could fall on my bed just in case. Because
that's right, extremely top heavy. Forgot about that.
Yeah, it's very peculiar. Even I've been trying to learn how to balance on one foot, which I'm like, this is absolutely ridiculous. But at the same time, I'm getting better. So interesting.
So either do nothing or do something small that can make it seem like you're productive.
Definitely, it's that whole idea of having achieved something. Like people who make a to-do list that never gets done, you just need to break up your to-dos, right? Like you have to. You're like
smaller chunks.
It's so you 100%. Like people are like, oh, clean your shed. Get fucked. You know what? Move 3 things from the shed. That's your to-do list.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, you know what? I straightened up all the extension cords in the shed. Good. Half of it's done. Oh, I also threw out stuff that was expired or whatever. Done. Like that. Those are reasonable tasks that, like, especially when it's your own time. Like I have this conversation regularly with my wife. Is that like a statutory holiday, okay, that's the government, who are the absolute worst, saying, hey, you need a day off. Like if the worst says you need a day off, don't schedule shit. Even they say we need a break. Like, and they're the worst. So it's like, it only makes sense that you're like, yeah, we should do something that we treat ourselves like, hey, you know what, we went for massages one day, stuff like that. And that's if you have that thing. But otherwise, yeah, just hang out, relax, enjoy yourself, because that way you're like, okay, now I can be refreshed, right? Scheduling too many things on the weekend, you're like, yeah, no, don't do that.
No, that's bogus.
No, we got it down to where I'm like, we can add one thing a day. We have our normal stuff and we can add one thing. As soon as we add 2 things, we have to subtract it from tomorrow's things, and we do no things tomorrow. We do one extra thing per day. If we do more than one thing, you're like, oh, it's just going to get frustrating, and things aren't going to be enjoyable. It's just a nightmare.
What's that 4-day work week being the norm? That would good. Yes, right. Awesome.
Hey, we should have a 3-day work week and a 4-day weekend. That's what we should be having, right? Is like we should even switch it from like Friday to Monday is off, and we just work Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. That's it, and then done. That would be perfect. I think people would do more in that time than they would in anything else. That's my opinion.
Well, yeah, because then you have to like rush to get whatever it is done.
Okay, but do you? I don't think you do. You just have to be efficient.
Yeah.
Okay. And teaching efficient, like, look,
work smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
Like, look, there are some things that just are time consuming. Totally reasonable.
Oh my gosh.
But like, oh, we just need more people. But it's like, okay, but it's a small job. That's fine. If you had 4 days off where you could have 1 day to relax, you have 1 day for groceries, 1 day for laundry, 1 day for cleaning. You're like, you could go out all of those nights, enjoy yourself those nights, but also everything could be done around the house. You're not going to get backed up with stuff. 3-day work week, realistically, people could sub in for you. Essentially, you would have everyone has a full-time job, and they just pick which 3 days of the week they work. Okay. It actually makes sense, right?
I think it would be good to do. Like, let's say you have the 3-day work week, and I would probably do like alternate. So you do like, let's say I'm working like Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So you have Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday off. And then you get 3 Fridays. Like,
yeah, but I find that going back to work is the hardest part about vacation, because you're like, oh, this fucking people, fucking stupid shit I have to do now because I don't want to be
I have 150 emails. Fuck me.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
I used to
just check my email.
I used to just delete. If it's important, you'll send it to me. That's fine. I just respond. I would have an out of office be like, I'm back in the office and replying to emails. If there was something that was important, please resend. And keep that for the first 2 days that I'm back in the office.
What do you have? Do you have it as like an auto reply, or like just?
Yeah, that's what I would do.
Okay.
And then I had a manager's like, you can't do that. I'm like, why not? If it's important, you resend it. If it wasn't important,
yeah,
who gives a shit?
Or there was like the thing where somebody sent it like or sent an email wanting a response on like Friday at like 4:40 something.
Oh,
and then the person comes in on Monday, and then that first person goes, "Where's my thing? I sent it to you on Friday." And it's like, I just got here. You sent it to me 20 minutes ago.
Yeah. Yeah. He's like, well, weren't you working on the weekend?
No,
I wasn't. Well, it would have taken a short period of time. Yeah. No, get fucked. Like, that is my own personal. It's the same thing when people at work are like, hey, we should hang out sometime. No, that's my personal time. Unless I'm getting paid, I'm not talking to you. Immediately. Absolutely. That's 100% what I would do. Yeah. See, people are you're too anxious about being nice. Where's nice ever gotten you?
Because here's the thing, Dino, when you can talk about not being nice and run through a simulation, but when you're in the moment and you do the not nice thing, you're then there with your consequences.
I am 6'2" and 265 pounds. Right. I would love to see those consequences. And look at my face. This doesn't look like it hasn't been through danger. Like, people are like, that guy's been punched in the face a lot. Yeah, that's fine. I'm okay with it. And also, too, I have an Asian wife. I know how to suffer. I know how to suffer very easily. Okay, she beats me all the time. She just says negative things. She's like, why are you getting fat again? Like, thanks. I love you too. It's fine. Great. I just say, I'm like, it's winter weight. She's like, it's summertime. I'm like,
Iron belly.
My secret attack. It's fine. I like it.
Carol, thank you so much for coming on Generation.
Thank you for having me. It was super fun.
Where can people find and follow you and all that good stuff?
I'm on all platforms: Venmo, Instagram.
Absolutely.
$5. Why not?
At the World's Best Laugh. The World's with an S. Best Laugh. That's me. And I have shows every day this week coming up. So come see a show if you're in Los Angeles. Every day. Tonight, tomorrow, Wednesday, Thursday. Yeah, I'll be out there. Oh, and next Saturday, of course.
Sweet. Fantastic.
You can find the show at Generation Dan on all platforms. You can find me at Atlas Novak on all of those platforms, or my YouTube channel, The Epileptic Comic, or my other podcast, Nexus at Night, which is about a trading card game. If you don't care about that, I completely understand. How about you?
You can find me at Dino the Genetic Marvel. And just for reference, anyone who's been watching and has gotten to this point, you should know that it was about minute 46 when Atlas finally brought out some nerd shit. So if you want to comment that, if you're watching this at a later time, to let us know that you actually got to this point that Atlas said nerd shit. It took him 46 minutes. But this time, last time it was like 3 minutes. Okay.
Wait. What was it? Iron Hand or Otto von Bismarck?
It was Iron Hand.
Iron Hand.
Yeah, Iron Hand was 40. Okay. Yeah, minute 46. That's
all right.
Carol, we have a cooking show with one of our previous co-hosts, Cole, and Zaragoza says nerds. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. We're doing a cooking show called Hammer and Cheese. It's every Tuesday, everyone, if you want to check it out. But it was like 3 minutes in, and Atlas started busting out historical stuff about Napoleon. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, 3 minutes? Are you serious?
Did you see the movie?
Huh?
Atlas? Did you see the movie Napoleon?
I didn't. I heard it was terrible.
Is it?
I stayed awake for the whole thing. That's my measure of.
That's a huge, yeah.
Yeah. If I could stay awake for the whole thing, then it was pretty good.
Okay, all right, I'll give it a try.
Especially, listen, all the trailers are people just looking and not talking, which I'm like, that's a lot of downtime for a movie. And if you can stay awake during that, you're like, yeah, no, that's a win.
Yeah, and the other thing that was distracting is his non-English accent. Like everybody else had an English accent, and he had no accent. And I was like,
okay, no.
That was distracting a little bit, but I got over it. I was like, whatever.
Yeah, that is. I think the worst part is like, England and France hated each other at that time. Like, why would you? That's like Britain won, you know?